You have to see him. It's yours. Damon froze, his heart stopping as he saw Isla shivering in the cold, clutching a newborn that looked impossibly familiar. 4 years of separation, secrets and betrayal crashed down in a single moment. Who is this baby? Why did she hide the truth? And most importantly, is Damon ready for the life-changing revelation waiting for him inside the hospital? Stay tuned, because nothing and no one will ever be the same again. Tell me, where are you listening from today? I beg you, please watch till the very last chapter. Don't skip a single moment, because the ending will truly touch your soul. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story. All right, let's dive in. Damon Carrington stepped out of the hospital into the biting night air, the city wind slicing through his tailored coat like a blade, carrying with it the distant hum of traffic and muffled sirens that echoed off the cold concrete walls. Every breath came as a cloud in the freezing night, and yet none of it registered fully to him. His mind was still locked in the labyrinth of business deals, boardroom conquests, and negotiations that had consumed the better part of his life today. He adjusted the cuff of his coat, brushing imaginary dust from the fabric, and began walking toward his sleek black car, his polished shoes clicking rhythmically against the wet pavement. And then, abruptly, the world seemed to halt. A figure appeared against the stark grey of the hospital wall, hunched, shivering violently, wrapped in a thin blanket that did little to shield her from the cruel bite of the night. Damon's brain froze for a split second, refusing to reconcile the sight with reality. The woman's hair, damp and clinging to her pale face, framed eyes that were impossibly familiar, eyes that had haunted his memories for 4 long years, eyes that had once held love, rage, and heartbreak all at once. And now, in this desolate street under the indifferent glare of the streetlights, those same eyes flickered with exhaustion, fear, and something fragile that made Damon's chest constrict painfully. Isla Monroe, his Isla, his ex-wife, the woman he had loved, lost and never truly forgotten, and in her arms, the softest, tiniest bundle he had ever seen, a newborn swaddled in an equally threadbare blanket, his cries delicate but urgent, cutting through the night like a fragile alarm. Damon's breath hitched involuntarily, a flash of disbelief storming through him, threatening to undo every ounce of his composed exterior. He stopped dead in his tracks, his hands curling into fists, nails biting into the palms of his hands. The baby's small, urgent cries echoed through the emptiness, and Damon felt the sound pierce straight into the hollow chambers of his heart, a stark, unrelenting reminder that life had moved forward without him. His mind reeled, struggling to comprehend how this impossible scene had unfolded. He remembered the sharp finality of their last meeting, the shouting, the anger, the irreconcilable differences, and then the cold goodbye that had left him numb and yet stubbornly proud. How had time, space, and circumstance brought him to this precise moment, where the woman he had loved was standing trembling in the night, holding a child he had never even known existed? He stepped closer cautiously, heart hammering against his ribs, as though it were warning him against what he might find. Every instinct screamed forward, protect, shield, claim, but he knew better than to rush. He had spent a lifetime mastering control, and yet now that control was slipping with every heartbeat. The wind rose suddenly, harsh and biting, lifting strands of Isla's damp hair across her pale face. Damon felt a shiver run through him, not from the cold, but from the sight of her vulnerability. Her eyes, clouded with uncertainty and fear, flicked briefly toward him, and then away, refusing to meet his gaze. For a moment, she seemed smaller than he remembered, fragile, as if the weight of the past 4 years and the solitary burden of a newborn child had hollowed her out. Damon swallowed hard, the lump in his throat making it difficult to speak, to move, to do anything but stare in stunned awe. The baby stirred again, tiny fists flailing, a soft whimper escaping lips that quivered even in sleep. Damon's chest tightened painfully, an almost unbearable mix of awe, terror, and longing surging through him. Without thinking, he bent his knees, lowering himself to the level of the small life in her arms. The smell of the baby, soft, innocent, utterly untouched by the cruelty of the world, hit him, making his hands tremble. He extended them hesitantly, as if the act itself required permission. Isla's eyes darted to him, searching, wary, questioning whether he could be trusted or whether the world had finally abandoned her completely. You're here," she whispered, voice barely audible over the gusts of wind, trembling like brittle glass. Damon's throat tightened, words failing him, heart hammering in a rhythm he had long thought only existed in dreams. Isla, what?" His voice faltered, drowned in the sudden roar of the wind that seemed to push the world into sharper focus. The baby let out a delicate wail, tiny hands reaching instinctively toward Damon, as if recognizing the familiar bloodline, the bond that Isla had whispered into existence without ever telling him. She barely looked up, but Damon could see the sheen of unshed tears on her lashes, the tremor of fear that ran through her body. And then, with a motion so slight he almost missed it, her lips moved, forming words that barely left her mouth. "Yours." The wind seemed to still, for a heartbeat, carrying the weight of the confession, allowing it to hang in the air like fragile crystal. Damon's chest constricted further, a pang of longing, regret, and sudden responsibility crashing over him in an unstoppable wave. He knew instantly, with a terrifying clarity, that he could never let go, never turn away. The past 4 years, the fights, the pride, all of it melted in the icy wind as he knelt fully, arms trembling, cradling both Isla and the newborn, as though a single misstep might shatter their fragile existence. A sudden shiver ran through Isla, her body folding slightly under exhaustion. Damon's arms tightened instinctively, moving her closer, pressing the small bundle to his chest. "Isla," he began, voice rough and low, raw with emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. But before he could continue, her knees buckled. She sagged against him, and he caught her without thought, the shock of her collapse making his heart lurch violently. The blanket slipped slightly, revealing the baby's small, delicate face and the softness of Isla's pale skin against his coat. The city's lights reflected dimly in their eyes, a surreal tableau of life, love, and pain frozen in that moment. Her lips barely brushed his ear, whispering words that made his blood freeze. "You have to see him." Damon's brow furrowed, confusion and dread flooding his mind. He had thought he understood the situation, had thought he had prepared himself for the impossible, but what was waiting for him, hidden in the shadows of that whispered command? His mind raced, heart hammering as the wind tossed their hair and the cries of the newborn cut sharply through the night. The world seemed to contract around them, leaving only the three of them suspended in a fragile, dangerous, electrifying bubble of uncertainty and revelation. Damon rose slightly, still holding Isla, his gaze scanning every corner of the street, searching for unseen threats. Shadows shifted, the wind howling with sudden urgency, and he felt the prickling of instinct, a warning he could not ignore. He tightened his grip on both Isla and the child, noticing for the first time the faint tremor in her fingers as she clung to the blanket, the pale flush of her cheeks from cold and fear. Every memory, every lost day, every argument he had carried with him for 4 years crashed into the moment with brutal force. The baby's tiny eyes opened, blinking in the harsh light, and Damon felt the impossible truth solidify in his chest. This life was his responsibility, his chance to reclaim what had been lost, and yet the shadow of uncertainty lingered like a knife poised above them. He looked at Isla again, fear exhaustion, and a hint of something unspeakable mirrored in her gaze. "Isla, what is it? What do I need to see?" His voice was steady, but the raw edge betrayed the storm inside him. The night pressed closer, the streetlights flickering in sudden unison, as if the city itself held its breath, waiting for the revelation she had promised. Damon's instincts screamed. Danger could be near, truth could be terrible, and yet every part of him, every muscle, every beat of his heart refused to turn away. He had finally found them, finally touched what life had hidden, and yet the unknown loomed like a chasm before him. The baby whimpered again, tiny fingers curling instinctively around Damon's thumb, anchoring him to a reality that felt impossibly delicate. Isla's lips parted slightly, as if to say something, and then closed again, uncertainty clouding her features. Damon's mind raced, torn between fear for her, awe for the child, and the raw, undeniable pull of the past that refused to loosen its grip. And then, just as his chest tightened with the unbearable weight of anticipation, she whispered again, more urgently this time, You have to see him." Damon's grip tightened, his knuckles white against the thin blanket. The wind seemed to howl with sudden menace, carrying whispers of memories, loss, and the uncharted territory of what lay ahead. Every nerve in his body screamed caution, but every fiber of his being demanded forward motion. The city around them blurred into insignificance. Nothing existed outside the small circle of life he now held in his arms. And yet, the word him echoed in his mind, unanswerable, impossible, tantalizingly dangerous. Who was waiting? What truth lay just beyond the next step? Damon knew only one thing with absolute certainty. He could not turn away, not now, not ever. With a deep, controlled breath, he adjusted Isla in his arms, supporting her fully, and began walking slowly toward the faint glow of light further down the street. Each step was deliberate, cautious, every sense heightened, as if he were walking into a storm. The newborn nestled against his chest, warmth and life pulsing under his coat, and Damon realized that nothing, no deal, no empire, no pride, had ever demanded more from him than this moment. And yet, the uncertainty, the whispered urgency of Isla's words, the tremor in her voice, and the tiny life in his arms all combined to create a tension that made each step feel like walking across a razor's edge. The city, cold and indifferent, held its breath with him. Damon's hands shook as he pushed open the hospital doors, the warm, artificial light washing over him in sharp contrast to the bitter cold outside. The antiseptic scent hit him immediately, sharp and sterile, a world apart from the night he had left behind on the concrete sidewalk. Every step he took echoed on the linoleum floor, heavy with the weight of the fragile lives in his arms. Isla's limp body rested against his chest, her small head tucked under his chin, and he could feel her subtle tremors, the remnants of cold and exhaustion seeping through the thin blanket that barely protected her. The baby, nestled carefully against his chest, breathed softly, a rhythmic sound so delicate and innocent that Damon felt it pierce the core of his being. He navigated the hallway with precise caution, each step measured, instinctively protecting the pair he carried as though the world outside could no longer touch them. Nurses appeared at the edges of his vision, rushing forward, concerned and professional, but Damon raised a hand, an almost imperceptible warning that kept them at bay. Every instinct screamed that this moment was fragile, that no one, no matter how well-intentioned, could separate him from the child he had just discovered was his own. Isla's hair clung damply to her forehead, curling slightly at the edges as she slept, her lips parted and pale, as if she were exhausted to the point of vanishing into the world. His mind reeled, thoughts colliding in chaotic bursts. 4 years of absence, 4 years of silence, 4 years of missed moments that had now condensed into a single breathtaking instant. Rage and guilt coiled together, a serpent inside his chest, writhing in fury at himself for failing, for allowing her to bear this burden alone. He caught a glimpse of the baby's face, so serene, so unknowing, and his breath caught. Those piercing blue eyes, like his own, blinked briefly, and something raw and uncontainable surged through Damon. The realization that this tiny life, this perfect and helpless being, was undeniably, irrevocably his, left him stunned, frozen in a torrent of emotions too strong to name. He reached the nurse's station at the end of the hallway, but he didn't pause. The buzzing, fluorescent lights above seemed almost accusatory, shining on his turmoil with a clinical indifference that made his chest tighten. He noticed the subtle lines of worry etched into Isla's face, even in her sleep, the delicate curve of her cheek, the subtle tension in her jaw, as though her subconscious were aware of the danger that surrounded them. And then her whispered words from the night outside resurfaced in his mind, haunting and relentless. He can never know the truth. Damon's fists clenched involuntarily, nails biting into his palms. What secret could possibly put this innocent, perfect life at risk? He reached the small private room the nurses had prepared, the door slightly ajar. He slipped inside, careful, aware of every sound, every movement. The air was warmer here, sterile, yet protective, as though the room itself were a cocoon for the vulnerable trio. Damon lowered himself to the edge of the hospital bed, kneeling carefully, adjusting the blanket around Isla to shield her from the harsh lighting. He could feel the weight of her body against him, fragile, exhausted, and yet somehow stronger than he could have imagined. His chest rose and fell with the baby's soft breathing, each tiny exhalation a rhythm that tethered him to reality in a way that no boardroom, no deal, no empire ever had. He studied the baby's delicate features, the soft curl of hair on the small head, the tiny fists that occasionally flexed with instinctive motion. Damon's heart constricted painfully as he traced the curve of the infant's nose with his eyes, the soft line of the lips, and the undeniable likeness to himself. The recognition was terrifying in its clarity, grounding him while threatening to overwhelm every rational thought he had ever possessed. He held the baby closer, instinctively shielding the fragile form from the distant hum of hospital activity, from the flicker of fluorescent light that seemed almost intrusive. This was his child, his blood, his responsibility, his miracle, his impossible reality. Isla stirred slightly, a soft groan escaping her lips, and Damon's hands tightened instinctively around both of them. Her eyelids fluttered, hesitant, and he could see the faint trace of fear clouding her gaze as she finally looked up. "Damon," she whispered, the name barely escaping, fragile as a breath. Her voice, so weak and quiet, made him ache in a way that no fury or regret ever could. He pressed a finger gently against her lips to calm her, murmuring, "Shh, I'm here. Both of you. I've got you." The weight of those words, of the reality that he could no longer deny, pressed upon him, the responsibility almost unbearable, and yet an unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest, the warmth of recognition, of love, of the possibility of redemption. The baby twitched suddenly, tiny fists curling reflexively around Damon's thumb, and in that instant the blue eyes blinked open, meeting Damon's gaze. Shock, awe, and an unrelenting certainty collided in him like lightning striking stone. This was undeniably his child. His heart threatened to break and expand all at once. The sound of the soft whimper drew him in, the tiny fingers gripping his own with astonishing strength, and Damon felt the raw magnitude of what Isla had carried alone. He shifted carefully, adjusting her body, the blanket, the newborn, ensuring every movement was deliberate, protective, calculated, because the fragility of this moment demanded nothing less than complete devotion. He studied Isla's features, the small beads of sweat along her hairline, the shallow rise and fall of her chest, and realized the depth of the silent battle she had fought for years. She had survived alone, hidden from him, hidden from the world, protecting what was theirs, and Damon felt a rage so pure, so sharp, that it cut through him like fire. He wanted to shake her gently, to demand answers, to understand every reason, every fear, every secret she had borne in solitude. But the moment was delicate, and he refrained, holding both of them close, as though letting go would shatter them instantly. A nurse approached, her voice cautious, professional. "Sir, Damon's raised hand halted her, eyes locking on hers with icy determination. "Do not come near the baby, not until I say," he said, voice low, unwavering, carrying a weight that silenced all questions. The nurse paused, recognizing the authority, the unspoken bond, and stepped back, leaving Damon to the fragile balance of his new reality. Isla stirred again, a soft whimper escaping, eyes blinking open briefly, and Damon felt the surge of protective instinct, the recognition of life entrusted to him in its purest, most vulnerable form. Isla's eyes widened slightly, clouded with emotion, and she whispered again, faint but urgent, He doesn't know. He can't. Not yet." Damon's jaw tightened, his grip on the child firm, the storm of questions and fear erupting in his mind. What truth had she hidden? Why had she chosen to bear this alone? His gaze flicked from her to the baby, back to her, trying to piece together the fragments of a life that had unfolded without his presence. And then, a sudden flicker of movement in the corner of the room, a shadow passing briefly, made his pulse spike. Was it a trick of the light, a reflection, or a warning he could not ignore? He pressed a finger gently to the baby's chest, feeling the tiny heartbeat thrumming like a drum against his own. Each beat was a tether, a promise, and a revelation that anchored him to the present, even as the past loomed like a specter. Isla shifted slightly, and he leaned closer, murmuring, "Whatever it is, we face it together. You, him, me. No one touches either of you." Her lips trembled in response, the faintest nod acknowledging the unspoken vow. And yet, the tension remained, the whispered secrets hovering in the room like invisible blades, waiting to fall. The baby's eyes blinked once more, catching the harsh fluorescent light, locking on Damon's gaze, and in that brief, electrifying moment, he knew with unshakable certainty. This was his son. This innocent, fragile life, so perfect, so untamed in its vulnerability, carried the weight of everything he had lost and everything he now had a chance to reclaim. Damon felt the enormity of the responsibility crash over him, and with it, an unbreakable determination surged. No matter the cost, no matter the danger, no one would ever harm them again. But as the newborn cooed softly, tugging instinctively at his fingers, Damon's attention flicked toward Isla's trembling lips, moving in words he could barely catch. The whispered urgency, the fear she carried, the secret she held, all of it pressed into him with a force that made his chest ache. He realized, with a sharp, gut-wrenching certainty, that while he had found them, the world outside the walls of this hospital might not yet be safe. Something, someone, had been waiting, watching, and the word impossible no longer sufficed to describe the storm he now faced. Damon's eyes swept the room, calculating, protective, aware, and yet nothing in his life had prepared him for the weight of this discovery, for the fragility of the lives in his arms, for the undeniable truth staring him straight in the face. His son, his responsibility, his impossible miracle. The realization made his chest tighten painfully, but also steeled him. He would not flinch. He would not falter. And yet, as Isla's whispered voice barely carried through the room, a final chilling truth lingered. You have to see him." Damon's heart leapt, a mix of fear and anticipation binding him to the edge of the unknown. He shifted, adjusting the blanket, holding both Isla and the baby closer, and prepared himself for the revelation that awaited, whatever it might be. Outside, the hum of the city faded into insignificance, leaving only the fragile, unbreakable bubble of life in his arms. And in that suspended moment, he understood fully that nothing, no deal, no empire, no pride, had ever demanded more from him than this instant. The room felt impossibly quiet after the storm of revelations, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for what would come next. Damon sat on the edge of the hospital bed, still cradling the newborn with careful, reverent hands, while Isla lay beside him, fragile and trembling under the weight of exhaustion and the lingering frost of fear. The soft hum of the machines and the distant footsteps of the night shift created an eerie backdrop to the stillness, each sound magnified, each movement seemingly echoing like a warning. Damon's gaze never left her, scanning her face for any hint of injury, of pain, or of the lingering ghosts that haunted her from the years they had been apart. Isla's eyelids fluttered, a faint shiver running through her delicate frame, and then she whispered, barely audible, You shouldn't be here." The words were hesitant, coated with layers of fear, caution, and a vulnerability Damon had not expected to see. They hit him with an almost physical force, tugging at the corners of his pride, unraveling the carefully maintained armor of years spent in control. Damon's jaw tightened, a mixture of fury, desperation, and protective instinct igniting inside him. His voice came out low, rough, but unwavering. "I don't care about rules, Isla. I care about you and him." The words hung in the air, raw and unpolished, a declaration that had nothing to do with protocol or propriety, but everything to do with heart and instinct. Memories of their final fight, pride, misunderstanding, heartbreak, flashed in sharp, unrelenting waves through Damon's mind. He remembered the bitter words exchanged, the slammed doors, the suffocating silence that had followed, the endless nights filled with regret that he never admitted to anyone. And yet none of that compared to the stakes in this room. The newborn, tiny and vulnerable, squirmed slightly in his grasp, curling delicate hands instinctively around his fingers. The simple act, so small and innocent, anchored him, tethering him to a reality that was terrifying and breathtaking all at once. Isla's eyes opened wider, wet with unshed tears, flicking toward him with a mixture of fear and unspoken pleading. Damon could see the woman who had suffered silently for years, hiding a life he had never known, protecting a child from dangers he had not imagined. Her lips quivered slightly, the faintest catch of her breath betraying the strength it had taken for her to survive alone. Damon's chest burned with guilt, an all-consuming fire that refused to be quelled. 4 years lost, a lifetime of moments missed, and now this fragile miracle, the baby, the embodiment of what they had once shared and what they could have had, rested entirely in his hands. "Why didn't you tell me?" Damon demanded, voice low but trembling, eyes locked on hers as if trying to force the truth out of her. He could feel the tension coiling in his chest, the years of pride and suppression unraveling under the sheer weight of the present. Isla swallowed hard, her throat moving with the effort, and she refused to meet his gaze, murmuring instead, "I couldn't. It was too dangerous." Her words were soft, hesitant, but they carried the weight of mountains. Damon's hands tightened involuntarily around the newborn, instinctively shielding the child from both imagined and real threats, while his mind raced to decipher what she had endured in the shadows. The room suddenly felt colder, sharper, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the tension and were reflecting it back with cruel precision. Damon's eyes swept instinctively to the window, the glass reflecting the sterile hospital light, when a flicker of movement caught his attention. His pulse jumped, fingers tightening against the tiny body in his arms. A shadow lingered outside, unmoving, observing, almost perfectly still, yet exuding a presence that set every nerve on edge. Damon's mind raced. Was it a passerby? A nurse on the other side of the hall? or something far more dangerous. He felt the weight of unspoken threats pressing down, the fear that Isla had whispered of still very much alive and waiting. He adjusted Isla gently, ensuring her comfort while keeping the newborn close, heart hammering against his chest. Every instinct screamed protection, every fiber of his being demanded vigilance. His gaze never left the window, every flicker of light outside causing his pulse to spike. The baby stirred again, small hands brushing against Damon's collarbone, reminding him of what was at stake: innocence, life, and the fragile chance to reclaim what had been lost. Isla's trembling hands brushed briefly against his arm, as if seeking reassurance, and Damon's jaw tightened. He would not allow fear to take them. He would not flinch, even if the world outside was filled with shadows and danger. Memories of the past mingled with the terror of the present, each one a sharp, unrelenting thorn. Damon remembered her smile before the fights, the nights of shared laughter, the silent arguments carried in glances and touches. And now the cost of pride and misunderstanding was clear. The shadow outside the window was a reminder that the past had never truly left them, that threats, enemies, and secrets lingered in ways neither of them could have anticipated. The baby's eyes opened wide briefly, staring directly at Damon with a clarity that was almost unsettling. It was as though the child could sense the weight of the moment, the fragile tension between safety and danger, between trust and fear. Damon swallowed hard, voice low but steady. "Isla, tell me everything. I need to know what we're facing." Her lips moved, quivering, hesitant, but she shook her head slightly, fear keeping the words trapped. Damon's mind refused to accept silence. He adjusted the baby in his arms, holding him closer, feeling the small body respond instinctively to his heartbeat, and he realized with terrifying clarity that they were more vulnerable than ever. Every movement outside the window, every flicker of shadow could carry a threat he might not yet understand. He glanced at Isla again, catching her eyes finally, the fear mirrored in their depths, and he understood that she had borne unimaginable burdens alone. Her silence, her secrecy, her choices, all of them had been made to protect this tiny life, and yet the unknown now loomed larger than ever. Damon's hands tightened around the newborn, the warmth of life pressing against his chest, and he realized that for all his control, all his power, he was utterly unprepared for the challenges that awaited, and yet he could not, would not step back. A distant creak of a hallway door made his pulse spike again, and the shadow outside the window shifted slightly, subtle yet deliberate, a reminder that someone was watching, waiting, and possibly planning. Damon's eyes narrowed, the icy control that had defined him for decades resurfacing instantly, tempered by the protective fire of a father and a man who had lost too much to risk anything again. Isla's trembling intensified, the soft rise and fall of her chest betraying exhaustion and fear. Damon whispered gently, "I'm not leaving. Not you. Not him. Whoever is out there, they'll have to get through me first." The baby's tiny whimper drew him back, grounding him, reminding him that life, fragility, and innocence were at the center of the storm he had stepped into. Damon adjusted his hold, rocking the newborn slightly, and the small, delicate eyes blinked up at him with astonishing clarity, a mirror of his own determination and unspoken promise. Isla's lips quivered, and she finally met his gaze, the first flicker of trust shining through her fear. "There's more than you know," she whispered, voice breaking. Damon's pulse quickened. The revelation hung in the air, a delicate thread he knew could snap at any moment. He shifted, scanning the room again, instincts heightened, senses screaming that danger could strike from anywhere. Every shadow, every flicker, every distant sound became a potential threat. Damon's chest tightened, awareness sharpening to a razor's edge. He adjusted Isla and the baby, holding them closer, ensuring no part of them was exposed. The hospital, once a sterile haven, now felt like a battlefield, each second pregnant with uncertainty and peril. And yet, in that crucible of fear, of vulnerability, of unspoken truths, a bond was forming, a connection forged in the fire of danger, love, and necessity. Damon's mind flicked back to the whispered words from the night before. He can never know the truth. What truth had Isla shielded so carefully? Who had she been protecting them from? And why had the past crept back into their lives with such ferocity? The shadow outside, motionless now, loomed as a tangible reminder that the answers, the danger, and the revelations were only beginning. Damon tightened his hold once more, whispering softly, "Whatever it is, we face it together. You and him, no one else." And in that instant, the baby's tiny hand twitched, brushing against Damon's cheek, anchoring him in a reality that was fragile yet unbreakable. Damon realized, with a clarity that made his chest ache, that for all the unknowns, for all the threats, for all the secrets lurking in shadows, there was one unshakable truth. He would not leave. He could not. And as the shadow outside the window shifted ever so slightly, he knew without doubt that the past had come for them. But he would stand between it and the lives he now held as fiercely as the cold wind outside had ever cut. The sudden, shrill sound of the hospital security alarm sliced through the tense silence like a knife, shattering the fragile calm Damon had tried to establish around Isla and the newborn. His heart slammed against his chest, muscles coiling instinctively, every nerve on fire with alertness. The sound was a warning, a signal that the sanctuary they had so briefly claimed was already under siege. Damon's first instinct was protective, a physical response as old as his survival itself. He shifted slightly, adjusting the newborn in his arms, cradling him with precise care, feeling the soft warmth of his skin, the faint rise and fall of his tiny chest, grounding him even as panic and fury surged through him. Isla trembled beside him, her hands gripping his coat, fragile yet desperate in their strength. Her lips quivered, whispering just above her breath, "He's after us, the man from my past." The words hit Damon like a blow, chilling him more than the icy night ever could. His jaw tightened, the familiar tension coiling in his shoulders, muscles taut with readiness. Someone who had hunted her before had tracked them here, found the hospital, and had the audacity to follow. Damon's mind raced, rapidly calculating every possible avenue of threat, every potential weakness, every exit, and every danger. Each second felt stretched, heavy with unspoken menace, each tick of the clock amplified by the pounding of his own pulse. He moved instinctively, stepping forward slightly, positioning himself between Isla, the newborn, and the hallway from which the danger would arrive. His hands tightened around the child, protective and firm, and he felt the tiny fingers clutching his jacket in response, almost as if the baby instinctively understood the tension of the moment. Damon's calm, controlled demeanor, his armor against the world, shattered, replaced by ferocious instinct. Every fiber of him screamed readiness, every sense sharpened into a knife-edge awareness of the environment. He could feel the air itself shift, the sterile hospital smell giving way to the metallic tang of threat. The footsteps came next, slow, deliberate, each one echoing against the walls, magnified in the vastness of the corridor. Damon's eyes flicked toward the source, scanning for any hint of movement, any shadow that could conceal a threat. Isla's trembling increased, her lips brushing against his chest as though seeking reassurance, though he doubted she would hear him over the pounding of their hearts. Damon's mind worked furiously, replaying every warning, every whispered secret, every flicker of a shadow he had noticed before, weaving them into a coherent sense of danger. Every muscle coiled, ready to strike, ready to defend, ready to obliterate anything that dared to come close. Then he saw him, emerging from the shadows, stepping forward with measured confidence, a smirk on his face that reeked of malice and control. Damon recognized the subtle menace immediately, the dangerous aura of someone who had hunted before and intended to finish what they started. Fear and rage collided inside him, sharpening his senses to a violent clarity. Every sound, the soft rustle of clothing, the echo of his own heartbeat, the faintest click of shoes on linoleum, resonated in his mind. He tightened his grip, instinctively leaning slightly forward, creating a shield of his body around Isla and the newborn. "Who? What do you want?" Damon demanded, voice low, controlled yet imbued with lethal intent. The man's smirk widened, a predator's confidence radiating from every movement. "You still don't know the full truth about this child," he said slowly, deliberately, each word slicing into Damon's mind like a blade. Damon's pulse surged, the blood in his veins throbbed with a mixture of fear, anger, and protective ferocity. Every instinct screamed that the threat was immediate, that any misstep could destroy the fragile bubble of safety they had barely claimed. Isla pressed closer to Damon, whispering urgently, "Damon, he's dangerous. He won't hesitate." The words, so quiet and fragile, sent a spike of icy dread through him. Damon's eyes scanned the room, the shadows along the walls, every possible point of entry, trying to predict the intruder's next move, calculating, anticipating, planning for defense. The man's gaze flicked toward the baby, then to Isla, a subtle leer playing on his lips, testing boundaries, daring Damon to react. Damon's hands tightened, the tiny fingers of the newborn curling instinctively around his thumb. The child was unaware, yet somehow aware, responding to the tension in the air with small, instinctive movements that anchored Damon further to his duty, his responsibility, and his rage. Every sound in the hospital amplified, every distant beep, every shuffle of feet, every creak of a door made Damon flinch slightly, heart hammering. Isla's whispered warnings, her trembling presence, intensified the stakes. Damon's eyes locked on the intruder, searching for a hint of weakness, any flaw to exploit. But the man exuded confidence, calm precision, and Damon knew immediately that this was not a petty threat. This was someone capable, ruthless, and fully aware of their advantage. "Who sent you?" Damon demanded, the low growl of his voice reverberating in the room. The intruder's smirk remained, unshaken, his calm defiance a mirror to Damon's burning intensity. Each movement he made was deliberate, a challenge, a taunt that ignited Damon's protective instincts even further. Damon could feel the tension coil in his chest, every muscle primed, every sense razor-sharp. The sterile hospital environment had transformed into a battleground in his mind, every shadow a potential hazard, every sound a signal of approaching danger. Damon adjusted the newborn in his arms, careful to shield him completely while maintaining his own posture, a balance of precision and raw instinct. Isla pressed closer, her trembling fingers brushing against his chest as though seeking an anchor in the storm. Damon's thoughts raced. How long had the intruder been tracking them? How much did he know? And what was the truth about this child that Isla had so carefully shielded from him? Each question amplified the uncertainty, the danger, and the urgency of the moment. A faint noise from the hallway made Damon flinch, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, the sound of deliberate movement. He stepped slightly forward, blocking the line of sight between Isla and the intruder, creating a physical shield that radiated protective intent. The man's eyes flicked to the baby again, and a slow, menacing smile spread across his face. Damon's pulse raced, chest tight, hands firm, every second stretched, thick with tension, pregnant with potential disaster. And Damon realized with sharp clarity that the next moment would define everything. Isla's voice trembled. "Damon, he's testing you! Testing us!" Her words, barely audible, sent a shiver down his spine. Damon's gaze locked on the intruder's eyes, analyzing every micro-expression, every subtle shift of weight, every hint of intent. He felt the surge of anger, primal and unyielding, merging with the razor-sharp focus of a man determined to protect what was his. The newborn stirred slightly, tiny hands brushing against Damon's collarbone, grounding him, anchoring him in the responsibility that now consumed every thought, every breath. The intruder stepped closer, deliberate, measured, exuding calm menace that contrasted sharply with Damon's coiled, explosive energy. "You think you understand, don't you?" he sneered. "But the truth about this child, will shatter everything you believe." Damon's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing, a low growl escaping as he realized that the game had just changed, that every choice, every move now carried consequences beyond comprehension. The shadow outside the window earlier had been nothing compared to this. This was real, immediate, lethal. Damon shifted slightly, his body instinctively angling to protect Isla and the baby, muscles taut, senses alert. He could feel Isla's trembling intensify, her fingers clutching at his coat, tiny movements that spoke volumes of fear and trust. Damon's mind raced, formulating possibilities, predicting the intruder's next move, preparing for any contingency. Every heartbeat was a countdown, every breath measured, every microsecond pregnant with tension. The intruder's smirk widened, and he spoke again, his voice a low, deliberate whisper meant to provoke, to unsettle, to manipulate. "You still don't know the full truth about this child." Damon's eyes narrowed, every fiber of his being primed, every muscle coiled for action. Isla's whispered gasp brushed against his ear, urgent and fearful, confirming the unspoken. They were not safe, not yet, and Damon knew with chilling clarity that the confrontation had only just begun. Damon's hands tightened instinctively around the intruder's coat, fingers digging into the fabric with the ferocity of a man who had lost too much to hesitate. The intruder's smirk remained, a thin, contemptuous curve that carried both challenge and mockery. Damon could feel the subtle, calculated menace radiating from him, each movement precise, deliberate, as though every step was choreographed to provoke, to test the limits of his restraint. The newborn nestled in Damon's other arm, squirmed slightly, tiny hands brushing against his chest, grounding him in a reality he could not ignore. Isla pressed closer, her trembling intensified, and her soft, panicked whisper brushed against his ear. "Damon, he knows everything. He knows where we are. And more." The words ignited a storm inside Damon, a conflagration of anger, disbelief, and protective instinct that coiled tightly in his chest. He could feel his heart hammering, each beat a drum of warning and resolve. His gaze never left the intruder, sharp, calculating, and icy with lethal intent. "Isla didn't tell you, did she?" the man said, voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Damon's pulse quickened. Every syllable dripped with venom, a deliberate attempt to undermine him, to twist the moment into fear and hesitation. "She only fled because she knew someone in your empire was betraying you." The words hit Damon like a fist to the chest, the icy edge of betrayal slicing through the thin layer of calm he had managed to maintain. The world he had meticulously built over decades, an empire forged through ruthless decisions, careful strategy, and absolute control, shuddered under the weight of this revelation. The thought that someone he trusted implicitly, someone at the heart of his business, could have orchestrated such treachery made his blood run cold. Damon felt the familiar rise of fury, sharp and unrelenting, mixed with a searing ache of betrayal that he had not anticipated. Isla buried her face against his coat, her small body trembling, shaking with fear and guilt. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice muffled, almost swallowed by the folds of his jacket. Damon's gaze softened for a heartbeat, but the softness was immediately replaced by the cold, ruthless clarity that had defined him for years. "This isn't your fault," he muttered, voice low but unyielding, the words more a command to himself than a comfort to her. He could feel the tiny heartbeat of the newborn against his chest, each thrum a reminder that innocence and life depended entirely on his vigilance, his strength, and his decisions in this moment. The intruder's laughter sliced through the tension, sharp, cutting, filled with confidence and malice. Damon's hands tightened instinctively, fingers digging deeper into the fabric of the man's coat as he assessed the threat. The intruder's eyes flicked to the baby, then to Isla, then back to Damon, a predator testing the limits of his prey, gauging how far he could push before Damon snapped. Every muscle in Damon's body tensed, coiled, ready to explode with lethal force, every instinct screaming to protect, to obliterate, to ensure that no harm would come to the fragile lives in his arms. The sound of approaching security personnel interrupted the moment, their footsteps echoing in the sterile hospital corridor like distant thunder. The intruder's smirk deepened as the men moved closer, dragging him backward with controlled efficiency. Yet even as he was pulled away, his words lingered like a poisonous mist, settling into Damon's mind. "You'll see. The truth will unravel everything you believe about your world, about your life, about this child." Damon's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the surge of adrenaline and the raw, unfiltered anger boiling within him. He lowered his gaze to Isla, whose tear-streaked face finally emerged from the folds of his coat. Her eyes were wide, brimming with unspoken apologies and fear. Damon's chest ached with the weight of her gaze, the unspoken trust, and the fragile bond now laid bare. He realized, with a clarity that both terrified and grounded him, that every action, every decision, every misstep could have catastrophic consequences for the lives he now held in his arms. The baby stirred again, reaching toward his face with tiny, delicate hands, a gesture both innocent and profoundly grounding. Damon exhaled slowly, jaw tight, mind racing. He needed answers. He needed clarity. He needed to untangle the web of betrayal that had infiltrated his life, threading its poison into the very heart of his empire, while ensuring Isla and the newborn remained untouched, unscathed by the deceit that had erupted into violence. Every instinct screamed urgency. Every muscle tensed in readiness for whatever threat might emerge next. The hospital corridor, once a place of safety, had transformed into a battlefield of shadows, secrets, and imminent danger. He adjusted his hold on the baby, careful to shield him completely while keeping Isla close, her trembling fingers brushing against his chest as a silent plea for reassurance. Damon's mind raced, scanning every angle, every potential weakness, every possible ally or threat in the environment. Every second that passed without clarity, without explanation, felt like a countdown to catastrophe. He could feel the residual tension of the intruder's words, their implications spreading like ice through his veins. Finally, Damon retrieved his phone, hands slightly shaking, not from fear, but from the intensity of what he was about to uncover. Each movement was deliberate, careful, because even the smallest distraction could compromise the delicate safety of the lives he held. The screen lit up, the cold glow reflecting in his piercing blue eyes as he navigated to the accounts, the files, the ledgers, the source of the betrayal. Damon's pulse quickened with each touch, each swipe revealing layers of deceit, manipulation, and corruption that he had never anticipated. Isla watched him silently, holding her breath, sensing the tension and danger that still lingered like a storm cloud above them. Damon's lips pressed into a thin line, eyes narrowing, muscles coiled, as the realization of the betrayal unfolded on the screen. Each entry, each transaction, each manipulated decision hit him like a hammer blow. The intruder's words had been true. Someone close to him, someone within his trusted circle, had not only endangered him, but had orchestrated a plan that reached into the most vulnerable corner of his life, the child he now cradled. The newborn stirred again, a soft whimper, and Damon instinctively adjusted his hold, rocking him slightly. His mind was a storm of anger, strategy, and raw emotion. Every fiber of his being screamed that no one would harm them again. Not this man, not the betrayer within his empire, not anyone. Damon's gaze swept across the room, scanning exits, corners, and shadows, his mind already formulating the next moves, the counteractions, the defenses that would ensure safety. He felt Isla's trembling fingers brush against his chest once more, a reminder of the stakes. Damon's jaw tightened, his blue eyes blazing with icy determination. "We will fix this," he whispered, voice low and resolute, more to himself than to anyone else. The screen of his phone reflected the scale of the betrayal, and Damon realized with chilling clarity that the battle had only just begun, that the enemy was far closer, far more dangerous, and far more insidious than he had imagined. The tiny hand of the baby reached up once more, brushing against his cheek, grounding him in the precious fragility of life and love that he had vowed to protect. Damon's pulse remained rapid, each beat a drum of resolve and warning. He could feel the full weight of responsibility pressing down on him, the crushing knowledge that failure was unacceptable. And yet, amidst the fury, the fear, and the calculated strategy, he felt a renewed clarity, a single, unwavering truth. He would not allow betrayal, deceit, or danger to harm them again. Damon's eyes flicked to Isla, catching her tear-streaked gaze, and he silently promised that whatever lay ahead, whatever secrets remained buried, he would face it all head-on. He would confront the intruder, he would confront the betrayer, he would untangle the threads of deceit and protect the fragile lives that now defined the purpose of his existence. Every instinct screamed vigilance, every muscle coiled for action, every thought sharpened with urgency. He tapped his phone again, scrolling through accounts and ledgers, a plan forming in his mind, and then paused. The numbers, the evidence, the manipulation, everything was more extensive, more insidious than he could have imagined. Damon's breath caught in his throat, heart hammering as he realized the full scope of the betrayal. His empire, his life, his family, all threatened by someone he had trusted. The room seemed to tighten around him, each shadow a potential hazard, each sound a signal of impending confrontation. Isla's whisper broke through the storm. "Damon, what is it? What did you find?" He met her gaze, a flicker of something fierce and unyielding in his blue eyes. "It's worse than I thought," he said, voice low, deadly calm, as the tiny fingers of the baby curled instinctively around his thumb. Damon's mind raced with solutions, confrontations, and the steps he would take to ensure their survival. The betrayal was deep, personal, and dangerous, but he would not falter. Not now, not ever. Damon's hands lingered over the glowing screen of his phone, eyes scanning every transaction, every account, every manipulated ledger with razor-sharp precision. Each line of numbers, each entry, each hidden signature confirmed a reality he had refused to accept until now. The betrayal had come from someone he trusted more than anyone else in his empire, someone whose loyalty he had never questioned, whose integrity he had taken as absolute. His chest constricted, a harsh metallic ache that burned with both rage and disbelief. His CFO, the very person he had depended upon for decades, had been orchestrating danger, endangering Isla, manipulating their lives, and exploiting the newborn as though the child were nothing more than a pawn in a calculated game of deceit. The weight of this revelation pressed down on Damon with the force of a tidal wave. He could feel it radiating in every muscle, every nerve, every heartbeat. The anger surged first, sharp, feral, and all-consuming, a pure and unfiltered rage aimed at the betrayal, at the cowardice, at the audacity of someone who had infiltrated the core of his life and threatened what he cherished most. And beneath the fury was a hollow ache, a gnawing guilt that he had been blind for so long, that Isla had endured this alone while he remained oblivious, trapped in the illusions of control that had always defined him. He shifted the newborn in his arms, careful, precise, as if the slightest misstep could shatter the fragile life he now held. Tiny fingers brushed against his collarbone instinctively, grounding him, anchoring him in the purpose that had never been so clear. Damon's eyes flicked to Isla, who sat slumped in the hospital chair, exhaustion etched into every line of her face, pale skin contrasting with the dark shadows under her eyes. Her lips trembled, barely moving as she whispered, I thought I was protecting him, protecting us, from you knowing." The words cut into Damon like jagged glass. He shook his head slowly, struggling to contain the surge of emotion that threatened to drown him. "You did this alone?" His voice was low, rough, heavy with disbelief and awe, every syllable charged with emotion he had rarely allowed himself to feel. Isla nodded, barely perceptible, every movement weighted with shame, exhaustion, and the silent acknowledgement of the monumental sacrifices she had made. Damon's chest tightened further. He realized in that moment that she had navigated a minefield of danger alone, shielding the child from threats he had been too blind, too absorbed, or too proud to notice. He felt an icy wave of clarity wash over him. Every betrayal, every deception, every hidden danger now revealed itself in sharp focus. His empire, carefully structured over decades, had been penetrated from within, poisoned by someone he had considered a cornerstone of his trust. Damon's hands shook slightly as he clenched the newborn closer, a fire igniting in his chest that demanded not only retribution, but immediate protection for the two lives he could no longer separate from his own. Every instinct screamed, failure was not an option, loss was unacceptable. Damon's mind raced. Every possible scenario, every angle, every potential weakness in his empire flashed across his consciousness. He had to act, to counter, to neutralize the threat before it could harm them further. The baby's soft coos echoed faintly in the sterile hospital room, a delicate reminder of the stakes, of the innocence that needed safeguarding, of the fragile bond that had formed in the quiet chaos of their reunion. Damon's icy resolve crystallized. Nothing, no betrayal, no threat, no cowardice would harm them again. He drew Isla closer, careful to shield her from both the world and his own swirling tempest of emotions. Her small, trembling hands pressed against his chest, gripping at the fabric of his coat as though seeking confirmation that she was safe, that they were finally beyond danger. Damon's lips brushed the top of her head, a silent promise that this time he would not fail, that he would protect them both from any threat, from any shadow that dared to emerge. The bond between them, forged through years of absence, fear and unspoken longing, solidified in a heartbeat that seemed to echo in the stillness of the hospital room. The shadows outside the window had already vanished, yet the sense of threat lingered like a cold, unyielding fog. Damon's gaze swept the room, alert, vigilant, searching for any further sign of danger. He noted every movement of the hospital staff, every creak in the floorboards, every faint noise that might hint at an unseen threat. Isla's breathing was shallow but steady. Her fingers occasionally brushed against his chest, reminding him that the fragile human element, the child, her, their shared vulnerability, was still at the center of everything. A nurse entered the room quietly, holding a sealed envelope, her movements cautious, as though she sensed the tension radiating from Damon. The envelope was addressed to Isla, the handwriting formal, urgent, but with no indication of its contents. Damon's eyes narrowed, a flicker of unease igniting in his chest. Even as he drew Isla closer to reassure her, The arrival of the envelope introduced a new variable, a new mystery that demanded attention. Every instinct told him that this was no ordinary hospital communication. Every ounce of his experience whispered that this could contain a revelation, a threat, or a secret capable of shifting the fragile balance they had just begun to reclaim. Isla's eyes widened slightly as she noticed the envelope, her trembling fingers hovering over it as though drawn by both curiosity and fear. Damon's gaze hardened, piercing through the air with an intensity that could cut steel. "Don't touch it yet," he murmured, voice low but commanding, a subtle warning that whatever lay inside could not be approached lightly. The newborn stirred slightly in his arms, a soft whimper accompanying the tiny stretch of hands, anchoring Damon in the dual responsibilities of immediate protection and careful analysis. The nurse hesitated, aware of the charged atmosphere, and Damon's eyes flicked toward her sharply, silently communicating both patience and urgency. The envelope itself seemed innocuous, small, sealed, standard hospital paper. But in that moment it became a symbol of suspense, a harbinger of the unknown, a potential key to unraveling yet another layer of danger surrounding Isla and the child. Damon's mind raced, considering every possibility. Could this contain news from another ally, a further threat, or perhaps instructions that only Isla could interpret? Each scenario tightened the knot of tension in his chest, sharpened the focus in his blue eyes, and heightened the protective resolve that had come to define him in these past chaotic hours. Isla's hands finally brushed the envelope lightly, but Damon's firm yet gentle grip over her fingers restrained her. He exhaled slowly, feeling the small warmth of her touch against his own, a fleeting comfort amidst the storm of revelations. The baby shifted slightly, tiny eyes half open, as if sensing the charged atmosphere, and Damon adjusted his hold once more, ensuring the infant's safety while maintaining a commanding presence over the room. Every movement was deliberate, calculated, and infused with the protective intensity that had become Damon's second nature. He turned his attention back to the envelope, studying its seal, the subtle impressions in the paper, and the faint markings that hinted at the urgency behind its delivery. Damon's mind calculated, analyzed, and prepared for whatever revelation awaited inside. The words of the intruder, the betrayal of the CFO, and Isla's silent suffering had already placed them on precarious footing, and this envelope promised yet another twist in a story that had already proven to be as dangerous as it was deeply personal. Every muscle in Damon's body coiled, ready to respond, while every instinct screamed caution. Isla's gaze met his, questioning and fearful, silently asking whether opening the envelope would bring clarity or yet another layer of peril. Damon's jaw tightened. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down harder, more urgent than ever. The baby's soft movements against his chest reminded him that innocence, life, and love all hung in delicate balance. Damon exhaled again, slow and controlled, and made the decision to confront the unknown head-on, prepared to shield Isla and the child from whatever danger or revelation might emerge from the sealed pages. The nurse stepped back slightly, sensing the tension, while Damon positioned himself to receive the contents of the envelope carefully, ensuring no one else could interfere, that no one could manipulate this critical moment. Isla's trembling fingers hovered near the edge, anticipation and fear mingling visibly on her face. Damon's mind raced through the possibilities again. Medical records, threats, confessions, secrets, warnings, all potential keys to the next stage of this unfolding ordeal. He glanced once more at Isla, then at the newborn, feeling the depth of his responsibility, the immense weight of the secrets, betrayals, and dangers surrounding them. Damon knew that whatever was inside that envelope could change everything: perceptions, plans, safety, and trust. The tension in the room was palpable, thick like smoke, every second stretched and heavy with suspense. Damon's fingers brushed the envelope lightly, ready to open it, to face the next revelation with the same resolve and protective fury that had guided him through the last storm. And with that, he carefully broke the seal, heart hammering, eyes fixed, instincts razor-sharp, aware that every word inside could alter the trajectory of their fragile, newly reclaimed lives. Damon's fingers lingered over the seal of the envelope, a subtle tremor betraying the controlled storm of emotions roiling beneath his icy exterior. Each heartbeat thundered in his chest as he carefully tore the paper, peeling it open with deliberate precision, fully aware that every word within could shift the fragile balance of this night, this reunion, this fragile moment of fragile clarity he had fought so desperately to create. Isla's eyes, wide and luminous in the soft hospital lighting, never left his face. Fear, anticipation, and a hesitant hope mingled in her gaze, a volatile cocktail that Damon could feel in the tightening of her slender hands against his arm. As the first sheet slid into view, Damon's blue eyes scanned the typed words, each line striking him with the force of revelation. Medical complications, risks during pregnancy, dangers that could have cost them both, consequences she had hidden to shield the child, to shield him, to shield a fragile future from the cruelty of reality. Damon's chest constricted, a sharp ache mingled with the heat of fury. She had borne this burden silently, enduring pain, suffering, and uncertainty while he remained blind. Focused on the empire, focused on life outside the quiet, hidden corners of their shared world. His hands shook slightly, not from fear, not entirely, but from the crushing intensity of realization. The depth of Isla's sacrifice, the courage and resilience required to face such dangers alone, filled him with awe and a brutal surge of guilt. How could he have been so blind? How could he have allowed pride, anger, and distance to define the years that had separated them when she had been carrying not just life but also the silent weight of unspeakable threats on her shoulders? His jaw clenched, a slow exhale escaping as the full magnitude of her endurance settled over him. Isla's lips parted, hesitant, as if she might speak, but the words failed her. Her trembling hands reached for the edge of the papers, her fingers brushing lightly against Damon's wrist in a gesture both tentative and pleading, a silent acknowledgement of shared responsibility, shared suffering. Damon looked down at her, his voice low, filled with a rare, raw intensity. "You survived everything. I will never let you endure another second alone." The words, heavy with promise and fury, hung in the air, bridging the gap of years of silence, of misunderstanding, and striking a chord of unspoken relief deep in Isla's chest. The newborn stirred in Damon's arms, small hands brushing against his face instinctively, tiny fingers curling around the fabric of his coat. Damon adjusted his hold with gentle precision, careful to cradle the child securely while maintaining a steady, protective presence for Isla. The baby's fragile heartbeat thrummed against his chest, each beat a pulse of life, hope, and the unspoken bond that had formed in the shadows of fear, betrayal, and long-lost love. Damon's blue eyes softened, but the intensity never wavered. He would guard this small life as fiercely as he had fought to reclaim Isla's trust. Isla's eyes glistened with tears, their wet brilliance reflecting the soft hospital lights, and she pressed her hand against Damon's chest, a silent plea for reassurance and understanding. Damon's lips brushed the top of her head, a tender motion that contrasted sharply with the controlled fire that still burned within him. "You faced everything alone," he murmured, voice low, measured but edged with emotion. "I won't allow it again. Not you, not him, not us." The weight of his words was palpable, tangible, a promise carried as fiercely as the newborn in his arms. The envelope's papers trembled slightly in Damon's free hand as he continued reading, absorbing every detail, the precise nature of the medical risks, The moments of crisis she had navigated without support. The doctors she had consulted in secrecy to ensure safety without alarming him. Isla's courage and foresight collided with Damon's anger, creating a volatile mix of awe, love, and furious determination. He realized the true magnitude of what she had endured. The isolation, the fear, the sleepless nights, the moments when every second could have turned disastrous. Damon's gaze swept back to Isla, capturing her small, vulnerable frame, the trembling lines of exhaustion on her face, and the defiant strength hidden beneath the surface. He saw not just the woman he had loved, but the warrior who had shielded life, love, and innocence with a resilience he could scarcely fathom. His protective instincts surged, primal and unyielding. Every muscle, every nerve, every thought aligned with one purpose: to ensure that nothing, no betrayal, no shadow, no danger would ever reach them again. The baby's tiny hands explored Damon's face, brushing softly against his cheek, a gesture both innocent and grounding, and Damon's lips curved ever so slightly as he cooed quietly, murmuring words of reassurance and love. Isla leaned forward, her face inching toward the baby, and a fragile, unspoken connection radiated in the quiet of the hospital room, binding the three of them together in a bond forged from hardship, secrecy, and the fierce intensity of reclaimed love. But even as they shared this fragile moment, the shadows outside seemed to linger, pressing against the edges of the room like a silent observer. Damon's instincts, honed over decades of navigating both the ruthless business world and personal betrayals, heightened with each passing second. He sensed that danger, though momentarily displaced, was never entirely gone. Every creak of the floor, every subtle movement in the corridor beyond the glass, sparked a tension in his chest, a silent reminder that the envelope's revelations, though deeply personal, could ripple far beyond the walls of this hospital room. Damon turned back to Isla, his voice low but firm, steady despite the storm raging inside. Whatever secrets you've kept, whatever risks you've endured, I see them now. I know. And I promise you, nothing will hurt you again. The words were a bridge across the years, across absence, across the pain they had endured. Isla's lips quivered, a breathless sob escaping as she finally allowed herself to lean fully into him, the safety and affection she had craved for years, now tangible, real, and electrifying in its immediacy. The newborn stirred once more, reaching instinctively toward Isla's face, tiny fingers grazing her cheek as if sensing the bond, the love, and the protection surrounding them. Damon's arms tightened around the child and Isla simultaneously, an unspoken vow radiating in his every movement. They were his responsibility, his purpose, his life, and nothing would sever that bond again. The hospital lights reflected softly in their eyes, shimmering like distant stars, illuminating both relief and lingering tension. Yet just as calm seemed to settle over the room, a tremor of unease ran through Damon. Isla's whisper, soft and trembling, pierced the fragile silence. "There's still something you don't know." Her words carried weight, urgency, and a hint of fear, a subtle tremor that Damon immediately recognized as the spark of another revelation, another secret that had yet to surface. The newborn shifted in his arms, sensing the tension as Damon's icy gaze hardened, mind sharpening, instincts alert. The calm, for now, was only temporary. Another truth lingered, waiting to emerge from the shadows. Damon's jaw clenched, his fingers curling protectively around both Isla and the child. Every sense, every thought, every muscle was primed for what came next. The envelope had revealed one layer of her courage, her secrecy, and her sacrifices, but the whisper of a hidden truth suggested that the story, the danger, and the depth of their shared trials were far from over. Damon's eyes flicked toward Isla, reading the fear and hesitation in her gaze, and he knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever lay ahead, he would face it alongside her. He would uncover the remaining truth, no matter the cost. A faint sound in the corridor made Damon's head snap toward the door, a shadow flickering briefly against the glass. His protective instincts flared, and he adjusted his hold on the newborn, instinctively shielding both mother and child. Isla's hand tightened slightly against his chest, small but insistent, and he felt her trembling as the weight of her secret pressed silently between them. Damon's mind raced through possibilities, scenarios, and contingencies, ready for any danger that might follow the revelation she had only just hinted at. The envelope's papers, though fully revealed, now seemed almost insignificant compared to the unspoken words, the lingering fear, and the promise of another truth. Damon's gaze returned to Isla, piercing, commanding, protective, unwavering. "Tell me," he said quietly, but with an iron edge, "because whatever it is, we face it together. You, me, and him. No one will separate us again." Isla swallowed, hesitation flickering across her delicate features, and the newborn reached a tiny hand toward Damon's cheek again, grounding him in the present, a stark reminder of everything at stake. Outside, the night remained deceptively calm, streetlights casting long, thin shadows across the hospital walls, whispering of dangers that still lingered, of secrets yet to be revealed, of challenges waiting just beyond their fragile bubble of regained trust and safety. Damon's senses remained heightened, alert, every fiber of his being vibrating with the intensity of the moment. Isla's trembling whisper had opened a new door, one he was determined to walk through, prepared to confront whatever awaited, no matter how devastating, no matter how perilous. And so, with the newborn secure in his arms, Isla clinging tightly, and the envelope now fully revealed but only partially explanatory, Damon braced for the next revelation. Whatever it was, whatever she had withheld, he would uncover it. He would protect them. He would ensure that the fragile family forming in that quiet hospital room would never again be threatened, never again forced to endure betrayal, secrecy, or danger unshielded. 8. Damon's gaze never wavered from Isla, fierce, unyielding, yet threaded with patience, as if he could hold the entire world in his eyes and still shield her from its dangers. The hospital room, still faintly illuminated by the soft glow of overhead lights and the occasional flicker of the city beyond the window, felt like a universe suspended in time, fragile and urgent, just for them. He could feel her trembling beside him, her hands lightly brushing his chest in hesitant contact, and every subtle movement of her body spoke volumes more than words could ever convey. His mind raced, yet his breathing remained steady, controlled. Controlled only in the sense that his focus was singular. Isla and the baby, their fragile yet unbreakable bond, and the secret she had hinted at. She drew a slow, shivering breath, eyes fixed on his, and Damon felt the raw intensity of her fear and hope collide in one piercing moment. "Damon," she whispered, voice barely audible, trembling with the weight of confession, hesitation, and longing. There's something you need to know. Something I've kept back. Not out of mistrust, but because I wasn't sure you could truly choose me again." Her fingers dug slightly into his coat, a tentative anchor, a silent plea that he listen, that he understand without judgment. Damon's jaw tightened, not with anger, but with anticipation and protective fury. He tightened his hold on the newborn, cradling the child against his chest, feeling the rapid, fragile heartbeat pressed against him, a pulse of innocence and life that both tethered and reminded him of his purpose. "Isla," he said, voice low, resonant, controlled, yet edged with emotion, "whatever it is, I am here. I am not leaving, not now, not ever. Tell me." Isla's gaze wavered, flickering with fear and hope, and she swallowed hard. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, a tremor coursing through her, as if the weight of the last 4 years, the silence, the isolation, the fear, the constant struggle, was pressing down in that very moment. I doubted, she confessed, voice fragile, yet growing steadier as the words left her lips. I doubted whether you could truly choose love again, whether you could forgive, whether you could come back, whether you could consciously choose us, choose this life, choose me, and not be swept away by everything else. Her eyes glistened with the first tears of relief and terror mingled. Damon's chest tightened, a sharp, almost painful squeeze of emotion that left him momentarily breathless. The layers of relief, awe, and longing crashed into him in an irresistible tide. She had not only carried a child alone, but had carried the invisible, intangible weight of their fragile trust, their fractured past, and the delicate hope that he would one day return with a heart capable of choosing love, of choosing them without hesitation or doubt. He shifted slightly, bringing the baby closer, cradling the child with protective care, the small bundle of warmth and life pressing against his chest as if it could anchor the tumultuous storm of emotions inside him. Damon leaned down, his lips brushing gently against Isla's forehead, a kiss both tender and fierce, a vow both unspoken and infinite. I choose you, he whispered, voice steady, trembling with intensity, always. His fingers traced the line of her jaw with deliberate care, memorizing the face he had longed for years, imprinting it into memory as though fear or time could never steal it from him again. Tears streamed down Isla's face, relief and joy mingling with guilt, years of unspoken suffering finally finding release. She pressed herself lightly into him, a mixture of surrender and trust, and Damon felt every ounce of her pain, every tremor of fear, every heartbeat aligned with his own protective pulse. They shared a silent, electric intimacy in that quiet hospital room, a mixture of past heartbreak, new beginnings, and fragile yet undeniable connection. Each breath, each glance, each soft touch carried the weight of history, loss and longing, transformed into the certainty of reunion. The newborn stirred, tiny fingers brushing against Damon's face, small yet insistent, grounding him in the present, a living symbol of the bond that had formed from decades of absence and a lifetime of love. Damon's arms tightened instinctively, protective yet tender, as if he could shield both Isla and the child from the world with nothing but the force of his will. Isla's head rested against his chest, her hair falling in damp, tangled strands that smelled faintly of hospital linens and lingering emotion, and for a moment the outside world ceased to exist. Yet even as calm seemed to settle, Damon's senses, honed over decades of both business ruthlessness and personal vigilance, remained alert. Every sound beyond the room, every creak of floorboards, every faint echo of distant movement kept his body taut, ready. Isla, aware of his subtle tension, lifted her head slightly, catching his eyes, and she understood in that instant that the calm was deceptive. The world outside, the dangers that had stalked them, had not fully retreated. Damon's mind raced through possibilities, anticipating threats even as he focused on the fragile human lives before him. He scanned the room with precision, noting exits, potential risks, and vulnerabilities, while never loosening his protective hold. Isla's trembling hand pressed lightly against his chest, seeking reassurance and offering a reminder that even amidst danger, there was love, trust, and hope intertwined with the peril. She took another deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper. Damon, I needed you to choose, because I couldn't bear another life of silence, another life where I fought alone. I had to know you could come back, not just by fate, but by choice. Her words, raw, poignant, and fraught with vulnerability, struck Damon with the force of a revelation. He realized that love, in its truest, rawest form, was not just about longing or fate. It was about conscious choice, about the willingness to protect, to forgive, to return and stand unwaveringly in the face of danger and uncertainty. Damon's lips brushed her hair again, his hands tightening around the baby, a simultaneous gesture of love and protection, sealing the vow in silence as well as speech. The bond they shared, the fragile family of 3 in that small hospital room, had been tested, forged, and proven unbreakable in a matter of hours. Yet Damon knew instinctively that the night held one more turn. One more thread of tension remained, waiting to unravel, waiting to challenge the delicate trust they had rebuilt. Then, as if confirming his instincts, a faint vibration from his phone broke the quiet. Damon's gaze snapped toward the device on the bedside table, a pulse of unease running through him. The screen glowed in the dim light, revealing an unknown number. A single message preview appeared. "You're not safe yet." His fingers brushed over the screen, freezing for a heartbeat, the words slicing through the fragile calm like a knife, igniting tension, instinct, and controlled fury all at once. Damon's jaw clenched, eyes narrowing, mind calculating possibilities, while the baby stirred again, tiny hands grasping instinctively for warmth and protection. Isla's head lifted slowly, catching his reaction, understanding immediately that the fragile peace of the last hours had been interrupted. Fear flickered in her eyes, mingling with trust and awe at his readiness, his unwavering determination. Damon's protective instincts flared to life in a precise, razor-sharp focus. Whatever danger lurked, whatever secret or threat had followed them to this hospital, he would confront it. His gaze returned to Isla, locking with hers, a silent declaration. "We face this together." The newborn nestled against his chest, the pulse of life steady and grounding. Damon's hand brushed a stray strand of hair from Isla's face, whispering with intensity and promise, "No one, nothing will ever harm you again. I swear it. But we must be ready. The fight isn't over." Isla nodded, small but resolute, her fingers tightening briefly around his coat, and Damon felt the electric current of shared resolve, of love, of survival, solidify into an unbreakable force. Outside the hospital, the night remained deceptively calm, streetlights casting long, wavering shadows along the walls, hinting at unseen eyes and silent movements. Damon's mind catalogued every scenario, every possibility, every potential enemy, while never loosening his hold on what mattered most: Isla, their child, and the fragile thread of trust and love they had painstakingly rebuilt. The message lingered, ominous and chilling, a reminder that the final secret of the night had yet to fully reveal itself. Damon's eyes flicked between Isla and the phone, every muscle tensed, instincts sharp, mind whirring. Whatever darkness awaited, he would meet it, fierce, unrelenting, and wholly protective. The newborn's heartbeat echoed in his chest, grounding him in the purpose he had finally, irrevocably recognized. This family, their fragile yet unshakable bond, was worth every sacrifice, every battle, every truth yet to surface. Damon exhaled slowly, eyes hard, determination etched into every line of his face. Isla's hand rested lightly on his chest, a subtle anchor, a reminder that even amidst looming danger, they were together. And though the calm of reunion had been shattered by the ominous message, Damon felt no hesitation, no doubt. He would confront whatever came next, fully aware that the path ahead was fraught, but also knowing that love, choice, and fierce protection would guide every step. And in the quiet aftermath of that ominous message, as the newborn slept briefly in the warmth of his arms, Damon and Isla shared a brief, electric glance, one filled with understanding, trust, and the knowledge that the night had more revelations yet to offer, each one stronger, sharper, and more crucial than the last. The final secret had emerged, yet even in its revelation, another threat waited silently, a shadow stretching into the edges of their fragile sanctuary, reminding them that survival, love, and redemption were never guaranteed. Damon's hands tightened gently around the newborn, holding him with the careful reverence reserved for something miraculous and fragile, while his other arm encircled Isla, drawing her close against the steady, protective rhythm of his chest. Every heartbeat, every breath he took seemed synchronized with theirs, as if time itself had slowed to honor this fragile family finally reunited. The hospital room, once a stage for shadows, fear, and uncertainty, now felt like a sanctuary, illuminated by the soft, forgiving glow of the overhead lights and the distant hum of the city outside. Damon's eyes, piercing and intense, softened only in the presence of what mattered most: Isla, the child, and the fragile peace that had finally settled, however temporarily, over their lives. Isla leaned fully into him, allowing the warmth of his body to erase years of loneliness, betrayal, and heartbreak, the tension in her shoulders melting like snow under the first touch of spring sunlight. Her fingers brushed against the baby's tiny hand, marveling at the delicate perfection, the quiet miracle that had been born from years of waiting, hiding, and enduring. Each gurgle, each soft sigh, each blink of the newborn's eyes seemed to etch itself into their hearts, a living testament to survival, love, and redemption. Damon's chest rose and fell with a steady, grounding rhythm, and he pressed a gentle kiss to Isla's temple, inhaling the faint scent of her hair, of relief, of home. "Our family begins now," he whispered, voice low but resonant, trembling with the intensity of the emotions coursing through him. No one touches us again. Not now, not ever." Every word carried weight, a vow forged from years of regret, longing, and raw desire to protect what was his. Isla's eyes shimmered with tears, but this time they were not tears of fear. They were tears of hope, of surrender, of recognition that love had returned, not as a fleeting fantasy, but as a tangible, living reality. Damon shifted slightly, adjusting the baby against his chest so that the tiny body nestled securely in his arms, and he marveled at the weight of responsibility, love, and destiny converging in that moment. The newborn's tiny fingers curled instinctively around his own, a silent acknowledgement of connection, of trust, of belonging. Damon felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest, a sensation he had long buried under years of business, pride, and self-imposed isolation, the warmth of being whole, of being a family. Outside, the city continued unaware of the storm they had survived, the betrayals, the threats, the secrets that had clawed at their lives. And Damon felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the world would remain oblivious while he held in his arms what truly mattered. He turned slightly to Isla, brushing her hair back from her face, noticing the faint tremor in her lips, the way her eyes reflected the depth of her relief and newfound trust. "We start today," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "Today, everything changes. No more hiding, no more running. Today, we are together, fully." Isla's smile was small at first, tentative, fragile, but it grew steadily, blooming into something luminous, radiant, a reflection of her inner strength and the joy she had reclaimed. Tears streaked down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. Instead, she pressed her head against his chest, savoring the steady beat that had become her anchor, her home, her sanctuary. I finally feel safe," she whispered, voice trembling with both vulnerability and resolve. "Safe. With you. With him. With us." Damon's lips brushed her temple again, then lingered near her hairline, a silent promise, a vow made without words. His eyes scanned the hospital room once more, noting every shadow, every corner, every potential threat. Yet his mind was untroubled, focused entirely on the life in his arms and the woman who had endured so much. He realized in that instant that the trials, the betrayals, the danger, they had all been necessary steps, harsh teachers guiding him to this moment where love, protection, and purpose collided with perfect clarity. He shifted, allowing Isla to adjust, and brought the baby closer, letting the child's small head rest against his shoulder. Damon's eyes softened as he observed the delicate rise and fall of the newborn's chest, the faint curl of a tiny fist, the subtle expressions of wonder and innocence. "You're mine," he whispered gently, voice full of awe and determination, "and I'll guard you, always. Every moment, every breath, nothing will harm you." The child stirred again, tiny hands reaching instinctively toward him, and Damon pressed a gentle kiss to the top of the newborn's head, savoring the pure, untainted bond that had been forged in adversity. Isla lifted her gaze, meeting Damon's intense eyes, and she saw in them a reflection of her own longing, her own journey, and her own resilience. "I can't believe, after everything, we're here," she whispered, voice breaking softly with emotion. Damon's hand brushed the tears from her cheek, his touch firm yet gentle, anchoring her in the reality of their hard-won reunion. "We're here," he said simply, conviction echoing in every word. "And we stay. Together. Forever." A subtle pause fell over the room, almost reverent, as if even the air around them had settled into acknowledgement of the moment's significance. Damon's gaze swept again to the sleeping newborn, then back to Isla, a shiver of anticipation and understanding passing silently between them. Every betrayal, every secret, every fear that had haunted them was now part of the past. No longer a chain, but a crucible that had tempered their love into something unbreakable, something ready to face the unknown. They stood there for a long moment, breathing together, hearts sinking, the newborn shifting slightly in Damon's arms, gurgling softly in acknowledgement, a tiny, innocent reminder that love, survival, and hope could prevail even in the darkest of nights. Damon lowered his lips to Isla's once more, a kiss deep with promise, with power, with the unspoken vow that nothing would tear them apart again. Finally, with a deep, steadying breath, Damon lifted the baby slightly, cradling the child between them, and they moved toward the hospital exit. The night air struck their faces as they stepped outside, cold and sharp, yet inconsequential in comparison to the storm they had endured together. Damon's coat brushed against Isla's shoulder protectively. The child nestled securely between them, and the trio walked forward as a unit, unshakable, unbroken, and entirely theirs. Even as the world carried on around them, indifferent to the intensity of their journey, Damon and Isla moved as one. Every glance, every step, every heartbeat reaffirmed the bond that had been forged in trials, in love, and in endurance. The city's lights glimmered around them like silent witnesses to the triumph of love reclaimed and danger survived. As they reached the sidewalk, ready to step into the life that awaited beyond the hospital doors, Isla's fingers brushed Damon's hand, and she leaned close, whispering softly, a hint of mischief mingled with sincerity. "There's still one more truth about us." Damon paused, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips, eyes gleaming with curiosity, anticipation, and unyielding devotion. He tightened his hold around both Isla and the baby, feeling the absolute certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together, unbroken, unshakable, and undeniably strong. The night stretched ahead, filled with infinite possibilities, yet for the first time in years, Damon knew with unwavering clarity that they had reclaimed what mattered most, each other and the life they would build together, anchored in love, trust, and a fierce, unending devotion. And as they disappeared into the city lights, a new chapter of their lives began, one written not in fear or loss, but in the enduring power of family, resilience, and the irrevocable choice to love without hesitation, without doubt, and without end. Wow, what a journey that was! thank you for staying with us till the very end. I hope Damon and Isla's story touched your heart as much as it did ours. If you felt every twist, every secret, and every emotion, don't forget to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you never miss a story that moves your soul. Until next time, remember, every story has its hidden colors, and every heart has a story waiting to be told. Stay tuned for more, here on Beyond Color Stories.